My name is Dr. Alexander Henderson. I am 50 years old. On the afternoon of October 14th, 2024, I was finishing a double shift at St. Jude's Medical Center in downtown Chicago. I remember the exact smell of that afternoon: industrial floor, wax, and the metallic tang of an oxygen concentrator that needed its filter changed. I've spent 20 years as a cardiothoracic surgeon, a job that demands you treat the human heart like a mechanical pump. You stop feeling the sanctity of life after the thousandth time you've cracked a rib cage with a stainless steel spreader. It becomes about tolerances, fluid dynamics, and the clock. That day, the clock was winning. I hadn't eaten since a granola bar at 6 a.m. I felt a strange, rhythmic thumping in my left temple, something I dismissed as caffeine-induced dehydration. I walked toward the staff lounge, my clogs squeaking on the linoleum. I remember looking at my hands that had bypassed blocked arteries and repaired shredded valves, and noticing a slight tremor. It wasn't Parkinson's, it was exhaustion. I reached for the handle of the break room door, but my fingers didn't close around it. Instead, they brushed past it as if my depth perception had suddenly evaporated. Then came the thunderclap. That's the clinical term for a subarachnoid hemorrhage, but it feels more like someone drove a railroad spike through the base of your skull and hooked it to a car battery. The pain was so absolute it wasn't even pain anymore. It was a white, out of the senses. I felt my knees hit the floor, but I didn't feel the impact. I just heard the sound, two wet thuds. I tried to call out for Sarah, the head nurse who I knew was charting just 10 feet away, but my throat was a vacuum. I couldn't even draw the air to vibrate my vocal cords. My vision narrowed into a pinhole, focusing on a discarded gum wrapper. Under a vending machine, I saw the silver foil, the dust motes dancing in the fluorescent light, and then the pinhole snapped shut. There was no tunnel, no shimmering light at the end of a corridor. Just the sudden, terrifying silence of a machine that had finally, irrevocably, seized up. The first thing I regained was my clinical detachment. I wasn't in pain anymore, which, as a doctor, told me everything I needed to know. Pain is a sign of life. The absence of it in the face of trauma is a sign of systemic failure. I was hovering, approximately 8 feet above the floor, pressed against the acoustic ceiling tiles. I could see the dust on top of the hanging exit sign. Below me, a man in blue scrubs was crumpled against the break room door. It took me 3 seconds to realize that man was me. I watched Sarah run over. I watched her drop to her knees and press 2 fingers into the side of my neck. I saw her face go pale. She shouted for a code, blue, and within 30 seconds, the hallway was a hive of controlled chaos. I saw Dr. Eris, a resident I had mentored, begin chest compressions. From my vantage point, the physics of it were brutal. I could see the way my chest wall yielded under his weight, the rhythmic, violent thumping required to keep blood moving to a brain that was no longer inhabited. I felt a strange sense of irritation. Eris was leaning too far forward. His form was off. He was going to tire himself out before the crash cart arrived. I wanted to tell him to adjust his pivot point, but I had no lungs. I looked at the monitor they hooked D up to. My body, asystole, a flat, unwavering green line. I was technically dead. My heart had stopped beating at 4:22 p.m. There is a specific kind of cold that comes with being a ghost in your own workplace. I watched them strip my shirt, exposing the pale skin of my chest. I saw the paddles applied. My body lurched, a macabre puppet reacting to the voltage, but I remained stationary against the ceiling. I felt no connection to that meat on the floor. I felt only a profound, heavy realization. I had spent my entire life trying to stave off this exact moment for others, yet I had never once prepared for it myself. I had focused on the pump, but I had completely ignored the occupant. The hospital walls didn't disappear. They didn't melt into a galaxy. Instead, they simply became irrelevant. The frantic noise of the code blue, the shouting, the rhythmic beep of the monitor, the tearing of packaging, faded into a muffled hum, like a television playing in a locked room next door. I turned away from my own dying body and saw a man standing at the end of the long, sterile corridor. He wasn't glowing with a blinding, cinematic radiance. He didn't have wings. He was wearing a simple, dark, colored tunic that looked like heavy wool, and his feet were bare on the hospital linoleum. He He looked solid, more solid than the walls, more real than the flickering fluorescent lights. As I drifted toward him, or perhaps as the distance between us simply ceased to exist, the air changed. It became dense, saturated with a weight that felt like a physical embrace. It was Jesus. I didn't need a theological debate to confirm it. It was the same way. You recognize your own Father in a crowded room just by the way he stands. He looked at me, and his eyes weren't kind in the way people use the word on greeting cards. They were honest. They held the terrifying, beautiful weight of someone who knows every compromise you've ever made, every lie you've told yourself in the dark, and loves you anyway. I looked back at the crash team. Eris was sweating now, his face contorted with the effort of trying to bring me back. Jesus didn't look at the body. He looked at me. He didn't speak with his mouth, but the words entered my consciousness with the force of a surgical strike. They were clear, direct, and devoid of any poetic fluff. "Alexander," he said. The sound of my name in his voice felt like my soul was being calibrated for the first time. "You have lived your life by the numbers. You have measured everything by what can be seen under a microscope or felt with a scalpel. But you are missing the 4 truths that govern the coming shift. You think you are watching a man die, but you are actually watching a world change." The hallway around us began to vibrate, not with sound, but with a tension so high it felt like the very atoms of the hospital were being pulled tight. He gestured toward the windows at the end of the hall, and for the first time, I saw what was beyond the glass. The hospital windows didn't show the Chicago skyline anymore. Instead, the glass became a high-definition feed of a grocery store. The one on 5th Street where I usually buy my coffee. It was mid-morning. I saw a young woman, maybe 25, standing in tea he produce aisle. She was holding a bag of apples, but she wasn't looking at them. She was staring at her phone with a look of such profound, hollowed-out terror that I felt my own non-existent chest tighten. "The first truth," Jesus said, his voice cutting through the sterile hum of the hallway behind us, "is that the era of perceived stability is over. You have built your cathedrals out of currency and your peace out of logistics. But look at her." I watched the woman's thumb tremble as she scrolled. On her screen, I saw a banking app. The balance wasn't zero, but the numbers were flickering, changing in real time, losing value as I watched. It wasn't a glitch, it was a systemic evaporation. She looked around the store, at the stacks of oranges, the rows of cereal, and I realized she wasn't seeing food. She was seeing things she could no longer afford to touch. The people around her were doing the same, a silent, frantic dance of checking screens and putting items back on shelves. "This is the shift," he continued. "The world has traded the soul for the digital shadow. Because you have digitized your lives can now be deleted. What changes is the very nature of ownership. By 2026, the concept of mine will become a mere why for the many, reserved only for the few who hold the keys to the servers. This is why the title of provider is being stripped from the hands of fathers and mothers and placed into the hands of an algorithm. It is not an accident. It is a harvest of dependency." I felt a wave of nausea. As a surgeon, I understood systems. If the circulatory system fails, the organs die. He was showing me a societal stroke. The woman dropped the apples. They rolled across the floor, bruised and ignored, as she walked toward the exit with her head down, her hands shoved deep into her pockets as if trying to hide her powerlessness. The scene shifted instantly. We were no longer at the grocery store. I was standing in the back of a large, modern church, the kind with stadium seating and professional lighting rigs. I recognized the lead pastor, a man named Marcus who I'd played golf with twice. He was on stage, his face projected onto 40-foot LED screens. He was talking about blessing and alignment, his voice rhythmic and hypnotic. "The second truth," Jesus said, and for the first time, I heard a note of jagged grief in his tone, "is that the great imitation has begun within the walls of my own house. Look at the shepherd." I looked closer. From this perspective, Marcus looked translucent, like a low-quality projection. Behind him, in the shadows of the backstage area, I saw men in dark suits, not deacons, but analysts. They were watching monitors that tracked the engagement of the congregation in real time. Every time Marcus mentioned a specific keyword, a graph spiked. This sermon wasn't a message, it was an A/B test. The church is being hollowed out to be used as a shell for a different spirit, Jesus explained. By the end of this year, the divide will be absolute. There will be the corporate church, which serves the state and the algorithm, and the hidden church, which serves the truth. The outcome is determined by one thing. Who do you fear more? The one who can take your tax status, or the one who holds your soul? This is why the warning is ignored. They have replaced the Holy Spirit with momentum. When the shaken G starts, the buildings will stand, but the altars will be cold. I saw Marcus glance at a small monitor embedded in his transparent plastic lectern. It gave him a cue to smile. He did. It was the most soulless thing I had ever seen. I realized then that the warning about the church wasn't about a scandal. It was about an eviction. The presence was being traded for permission. The church dissolved. I was suddenly standing in my own living room. It was evening. My wife, Elena, was sitting on the sofa, her face illuminated by the blue light of her laptop. My daughter, Maya, was in the armchair opposite her. They were in the same room, but the silence between them was thick, like stagnant water. The third truth, Jesus said, standing right beside my mahogany bookshelf, is that the war is no longer for territory. It is for the family's frequency. The fracture is intentional. Maya looked up from her phone. Mom, did you see the update? They're saying that new health mandates are mandatory for university enrollment. I'm not doing it. Elena didn't even look over the top of her screen. Her voice was flat, clinical, the tone she uses when she's already decided I'm wrong. Maya, don't be dramatic. It's a requirement. We follow the requirements so we can keep our lives. Your father would agree. Dad isn't here. Maya snapped, her voice breaking. And even if he was, he's part of the system. He doesn't see what's happening. I reached out to touch Maya's shoulder, to tell her I was right there, but my hand passed through her like smoke. I felt a searing, personal pain, a fracture in my own house that I'd been too busy to notice. This is what changes, Jesus said. The third truth is that loyalty is being redefined by crisis. Families will not split over old grudges, but over their definition of reality. Who is affected? Everyone who values comfort over conviction. What determines the outcome is the willingness to be an outcast in your own home for the sake of the light. Alexa Ender, look at your wife. She is choosing the shadow because it promises she can keep her seat at the table. Your daughter is choosing the fire because she will rather burn than disappear. I saw Elena's jaw set. She clicked a button on her laptop, a sharp, final sound. The distance between those two women, separated by only 6 feet of rug, felt like an ocean. I realized my own family was a casualty of a war I hadn't even admitted was happening. The walls of my living room didn't just fade, they unraveled like old fabric. Suddenly I was standing in a place that felt like the nervous system of the world. It was a vast, dark expanse filled with shimmering grids of light, data streams, financial ledgers, and biometric signatures pulsing like a digital heartbeat. Jesus stood in the center of this web, his presence the only thing that felt organic. The fourth truth, he said, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated in my very marrow, is that the great sorting is no longer a future event. It is a present reality. You have looked for a sign in the clouds, Alexander, but the sign is in the hand and the forehead. By the year 2026, the world will not be divided by nations, but by a single, invisible line, those who belong to the system and those who belong to the SPI writ. He pointed to a specific node in the grid. It expanded into a map of the United States, then narrowed down to a single office building in Northern Virginia. I saw a group of men sitting around a table. They weren't monsters, they looked like me. They wore expensive suits and checked their smartwatches. They were discussing the 2026 transition. What changes, Jesus explained, is the removal of the middle ground. The fourth truth is that neutrality has become a lethal luxury. In your profession, you call it triage. You decide who can be saved and who is beyond help. The world is entering a global triage. The system will demand total synchronization, your health records, your spending, your speech, and your very thoughts. To refuse one is to be severed from all. This is why the title of this vision is a warning. 2026 is the year the gate closes. Those who have not found their footing in the Spirit will be swept away by the current of convenience. I watched as a man at the table signed a digital document. As his finger touched the screen, a ripple went out across the entire grid. I felt the weight of it, a cold, calculated finality. It wasn't a conspiracy, it was a harvest. The world was being prepared for a new master, and the infrastructure was already laid beneath our feet. Hidden in the very apps we use to order our dinner, the digital grid collapsed into a single, freezing point of light. I was back in the hospital hallway, but the colors were different, sharper, more painful. Jesus turned to face me fully. We were standing just outside the door where my body lay. The sound of the defibrillator charging again. Whir snap. My body lurched on the table. Inside, Alexander, he said, and this time he stepped closer. You are a man of science. You believe in cause and effect. You have spent your life repairing the temple, but you have never spoken to the resident. You have looked at the heart 1,000 times, but you have never seen this. He placed his hand over my chest, the chest of my spirit body. Suddenly, it was as if I were looking into a mirror that didn't show my face, but my entire history. I saw every time I had stayed late at the hospital not to save a life, but to avoid the silent sea of my own home. I saw the pride I felt when I was called Chief of Surgery, a title that felt like a suit of armor against my own inadequacy. I saw the moment I stopped praying because I thought my scalpel was more reliable than a miracle. It was a direct self-confrontation. I wasn't being judged by an angry deity. I was being shown the reality of my own emptiness. I had been a good man by every social metric, yet I was spiritually bankrupt. I saw the moral compromises, the times I had remained silent when the hospital administration pushed for policies I knew would hurt the vulnerable, all to protect my pension and my prestige. The warning is personal, Alexander, Jesus said, his eyes burning with a terrifying clarity. If you return, you cannot return to the man you were. You are losing your status, your security, and your seat at the table. To live the truth in the world that is coming will cost you everything you have spent 50-4 years building. You will be a stranger to your colleagues and a burden to your wife. This is the choice. Do you want the life you built or the life I am? The door to the break room swung open. Dr. Aris walked out, his face buried in his hands. He didn't see me, of course. He walked to the nurse's station and leaned heavily against the counter. Sarah, the nurse who had found me, was there. Her eyes were red. He's gone, isn't he? She whispered. Aris nodded. He's been down for 12 minutes. We've given him 3 rounds of AP, shocked him 4 times. There's no neurological activity. I'm calling it at 4:35. As he spoke, another doctor, Dr. Sterling, the chief of staff, approached them. Sterling didn't look sad. He looked busy. He held a tablet in his hand. Aris, Sterling said, his voice low and urgent. Before you sign the certificate, we need to ensure the documentation is aligned. We've been under a lot of scrutiny regarding the new mortality metrics. If we list this as a stress-related cardiac event, it triggers an OSHA audit of our shift rotations. We need to categorize it under the pre-existing protocol. Aris looked up, disbelief etched in his tired face. He was 50-4 and healthy, Phil. He died because we've been running 80-hour weeks for 3 months straight. You can't just categorize that away. I can, and for the sake of the hospital's funding, I must, Sterling replied, his eyes cold and fixed on the screen. The board is already looking at the 2026 projections. We can't afford a scandal now. Just sign the digital override. It's for the best of the institution. I stood there, watching this human moment of betrayal. Jesus was standing right behind Sterling. He didn't move to stop him. He just looked at me. Do you see? The system protects itself by erasing the truth of the individual. This is the world you are being asked to go back to. A world that will ask you to lie about your own death to protect its life. The tension in the hallway was thick, a suffocating atmosphere of institutional coldness. I saw Aris hesitate, his hand hovering over the tablet. The choice was being made right in front of me, a microcosm of the global shift Jesus had described. Jesus looked at the tablet in Eris's hand, then back at me. If you return, Alexander, you will not return to the man who signed those documents. You will return to a man who must speak against them. You will lose your license. You will lose your standing. Your colleagues will call you broken, and your wife will call you a stranger. This is the weight of the fourth truth. The cost of the spirit is the loss of the system. I looked at my own body on the table through the glass. It looked like a discarded shell, gray and cooling under the harsh LED lights. I looked at Eris, who was finally pressing his thumb to the screen to authorize the lie. A deep, visceral roar of no erupted from my spirit, though no sound moved the air. I realized that my entire life had been a series of small, comfortable silences that had built a massive, suffocating lie. I didn't want the prestige anymore. I didn't want the safety of the institution. I wanted the weight of the truth I was standing in. I choose the life, I said. The moment the words left my consciousness, the hospital hallway didn't just fade. It imploded. The dense, loving weight of Jesus' presence was replaced by a sudden, agonizing vacuum. I felt myself being sucked backward through a narrow, jagged straw. The first thing that returned was the smell, the acrid scent of burnt hair, and ozone from the defibrillator paddles. Then, the pain. It wasn't the thunderclap of the stroke. It was the biological agony of a heart being forced to pump again. My ribs felt like they had been crushed by a hydraulic press. I heard a gasp, a wet, rattling sound, and realized it was coming from my own lungs. Wait, Eris shouted. I heard the tablet clatter to the floor. He's got a rhythm. Sinus. Tatch. He's back. I opened my eyes. The ceiling tiles were the same ones I had seen from above, but now they were blurry and distant. I tried to speak, but my tongue was a heavy, useless piece of meat. I saw Eris leaning over me, his face a mask of shock and terror. He wasn't happy. He looked like he had just seen a ghost, which, in a way, he had. I looked past him, searching the corner of the room, but the man in the wool tunic was gone. Only the cold, sterile light remained. The recovery was not a miracle of physical ease. It was a grueling, silent war. I spent 3 weeks in the ICU, the very unit I used to command. But the world I woke up into was exactly as he had described. It was early November 2024, and the tension in THE hospital was a physical weight. One evening, while I was still tethered to an 4-pole, Dr. Sterling walked into my room. He didn't ask how I felt. He sat at the edge of my bed and opened his laptop. Alexander, we need to discuss the administrative side of your episode. We've finalized the paperwork. It's been filed as a congenital vascular anomaly. It keeps the hospital's liability clear and ensures your full pension remains intact during your early retirement. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see my boss. I saw the analyst Jesus had shown me. I saw the great imitation, a man pretending to care while serving a ledger. It wasn't congenital, Phil, I whispered, my voice still raspy from the intubation. It was the shift. We're killing our staff to feed the algorithm. I'm not signing it. Sterling's face went completely flat. The friendship we had shared for a decade evaporated in a second. Don't be a martyr, Alexander. The 2026 mandates are already coming down from the board. If you don't play ball, you aren't just retiring. You're B&G erased. Think about Elena. Think about your daughter's tuition. I went home 2 days later. Elena was waiting, but she wasn't relieved. She was terrified. She had already received a notification on her phone, a summary of my refusal to sign the medical discharge papers. Our joint bank account had a temporary hold FOR verification of benefits. Alexander, just sign it. She pleaded that night over a dinner we couldn't eat. They're saying if you don't, we'll lose the healthcare coverage. Do you know what that means now? You can't even get a prescription filled without an active institutional ID. I looked at her, and I saw the grocery store woman from the vision. The fear of the digital shadow had already won her heart. I realized then that the personal fracture wasn't a warning of what might happen. It was a description of the reality I was now living. I was in my own home, but I was already an outcast. It is now March 2026. The world looks the same on the surface, but the skin has been pulled back. The 4 truths are no longer a memory of a near-death experience. They are the headlines of my daily life. I no longer practice medicine. My License was suspended 6 months ago for psychological instability after I refused to implement the new biometric tracking for surgical patients. Elena left in January. She didn't leave for another man. She left for the system. She couldn't handle the instability of being married to someone who was flagged. She lives in a corporate subsidized apartment now, one that requires a verified status. To unlock the front door, we speak via text, but her messages are brief, monitored, and cold. This morning, I went to the small grocery store on 5th Street, the one Jesus showed me. I reached into my pocket for my wallet, but then I stopped. I looked at the digital scanner at the checkout. A young man in front of me swiped his hand over the sensor. A green light flashed, and a soft chiming sound echoed in the quiet store. I looked at the shelf where the apples were. They were there, stacked in perfect, shiny rows. But next to them was a small, high-contrast digital sign that hadn't been there a year ago. It didn't show a price in dollars. It showed a carbon and health credit requirement. I looked down at my own hand. It was steady now, no more tremors. But I knew that if I put my hand under that scanner, the light would turn red. I would be severed. I walked out of the store without the apples. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I saw a black SUV parked across the street. A man in a suit sat inside, looking at a tablet. He didn't look at me, but I knew my presence was being recorded as an anomaly. I thought back to the hospital hallway, to the weight of that wool tunic and the eyes that knew everything. The warning wasn't about an apocalypse of fire. It was about the slow, cold quiet of a world that has decided it no longer needs the soul. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Chicago wind. I reached into my pocket and felt the small, wooden cross Maya had given me before. She went into hiding with the hidden church. It was the only thing I owned that didn't have a sensor. I took a breath, the air tasting of exhaust and coming rain. The gate is closed. I started walking toward the edge of the city. If this message felt important, it probably was. There are more stories like this, and they only get deeper. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next one, because some warnings aren't meant to be ignored.